There are moments in your life that split everything cleanly into a before and an after. Mine happened on a Monday morning in the lobby of Hartwell and Associates when I was running 5 minutes late, clutching an overfull cardboard coffee carrier, and wearing new shoes that I absolutely should not have broken in on a workday. The marble floor of the lobby was polished to the kind of shine that exists only in buildings where the rent is astronomical and the people inside like to see their own reflections looking back up at them. I always walked carefully across that floor. I was not, by any stretch of the imagination, a graceful person. I knew my limitations. I respected them. I had a whole system: short strides, flat shoes, no distractions. That Monday, I had none of those things working in my favor. My new shoes had a heel, not a dramatic heel, barely an inch, but enough to throw off my entire center of gravity. My strides were long because I was late. And the distraction, well, the distraction was enormous and dressed in charcoal gray and standing right in the middle of the path between the revolving doors and the elevator bank. Angel Hill. I had worked at Hartwell and Associates for 14 months. In those 14 months, I had learned exactly 3 things about the man: his name, his floor, and the fact that every single person in the building gave him a wide berth without quite being able to explain why. He was the head of acquisitions. He came in early and left late. He never ate lunch in the common areas. His assistant, a sharp woman named Dory who I'd spoken to maybe twice, always looked slightly frazzled in a way that suggested her job was not easy. And Angel Hill was tall. Not just regular tall, the kind of tall that rearranged a room. 6'3", maybe more, with broad shoulders that filled out the doorways he walked through, and a face that had clearly been designed to make people feel vaguely inadequate. Dark eyes. A jaw that could cut glass. The sort of mouth that was almost always set in a flat, neutral line that somehow still managed to communicate displeasure. He wasn't cruel. I want to be precise about that. In 14 months, I had never heard him raise his voice. I had never witnessed him being dismissive or unkind. He was simply present in a way that took up more space than most people, not physically, but in some quality I couldn't name, some gravitational weight that made rooms reconfigure themselves around him. Everyone felt it. I was not immune. I had, in fact, spent a non-trivial amount of mental energy over those 14 months making sure I was never in a position to be noticed by Angel Hill. Not because I thought he'd be horrible to me, just because being seen by eyes like that felt like being examined under a microscope, and I already knew I was the kind of person who did not hold up well under scrutiny. My name is Sammy Hobbs. I am 26 years old. I work in data coordination on the 7th floor, which is about as unglamorous as it sounds. I am 5'8" on a good day. I wear glasses that I've been meaning to replace for 2 years, but haven't gotten around to. And I have what my best friend Petra cheerfully describes as a face that makes people want to pat you on the head. I take no offense, it's accurate. I am not the sort of person that someone like Angel Hill would ever notice. Except, as it turned out, that Monday morning. I came through the revolving doors moving too fast. My bag slipped off my shoulder. I grabbed for it with the hand that was already juggling the coffee carrier. Overcorrected felt my new heel catch on absolutely nothing. Some invisible defect in the universe. And then there was a horrible, suspended moment where I was aware with total clarity that I was going to fall. Not trip and catch myself. Fall. Fully, embarrassingly, coffee's going everywhere. Fall. I was going to hit the lobby floor of Hartwell and Associates and probably take 3 cups of other people's morning coffees with me, and I was going to have to live with that for the rest of my professional life. And the only thing going through my mind in that suspended second was a very sincere wish that the ground would simply swallow me whole. It didn't. Something else happened instead. A hand caught my arm. Not gently, not tentatively. A firm, decisive grip that arrested my fall so completely that I barely had time to register. I'd lost my footing before I was standing again upright, the coffee carrier miraculously still level in my hand. The momentum of being caught pulled me sideways and into something solid. A chest. Warm, broad, smelling faintly of something dark and clean. Cedar maybe, or sandalwood. And I had exactly half a second to feel the shift of large hands steadying me before I looked up. Angel Hill was looking down at me. Up close, he was even more. I'm not even sure what word to use. More than he looked from a safe distance across a lobby or glimpsed through glass walls in a conference room. His eyes were a deep, dark brown, and they were focused on me with an intensity that made my thoughts go briefly and completely blank. "Careful," he said. One word, low voice, completely even. My mouth opened. What came out was not dignified. Yes, sorry, my shoes. I didn't, sorry. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, not quite anything actually, just a fraction of movement that I could not interpret. His hands were still on my arms. I became aware of this fact approximately 2 seconds after I should have. 2 seconds during which I stood there like an absolute person-shaped disaster looking up at him. And then I became aware of the warmth of those hands, and my brain sent an emergency signal, and I took a small step back. His hands dropped. "Thank you," I managed. This time, it came out like an actual sentence. Progress. He looked at me for another moment. Not long, not rude, just a moment. And something in his expression was doing something I couldn't read. Then he gave a small, precise nod, and turned, and walked toward the elevator bank. I stood in the lobby for what was probably 3 seconds but felt much longer and cataloged my internal state, which was, heart going at an unreasonable speed, face warm, knees slightly uncertain, and coffees, somehow, miraculously, intact. Then I went to the elevator, pressed 7, and spent the ride up staring at the doors and telling myself, firmly and clearly, that I needed to get a grip. Petra was waiting at my desk when I got to my floor, sitting in my chair with her feet up and her own coffee already half gone. "You're late," she announced. "Also, you look weird." "I almost fell in the lobby," I said, setting the coffee carrier down. "How almost?" Angel Hill caught me. The feet came off the desk. She sat up very straight. "I'm sorry, say that again." "It was nothing. I tripped. He was there. He grabbed my arm so I didn't fall. It was 5 seconds. Petra stared at me with the focused energy of someone who had just received significant news and was processing it at high speed. She was 27, worked in legal on the floor above mine, and was the kind of person who made friends with everyone within a 30-foot radius by sheer force of warmth. She had been my best friend for 3 years, and she knew me better than I knew myself, which was both a gift and, sometimes, profoundly inconvenient. "Angel Hill," she said slowly, "grabbed you to stop me from falling. It was a reflex. He probably does it for people all the time." "Does he?" "Does Angel Hill, the most intimidating man in this building, routinely catch falling coworkers? I don't?" "Petra, what did he say?" "He said careful." "Careful," she repeated, and then I thanked him and he nodded and walked away. "That's it. That's the whole story. It was not an event." Petra looked at me with the expression she wore when she was deciding whether or not to push something. She was good at reading people. She was particularly good at reading me, which meant she knew when I was understating something, which meant she knew I was understating this. She let it go. Mostly. "Okay," she said, reaching for her coffee. "But for the record, I want you to know I find it very interesting that you mentioned it at all, given that, by your own description, it was not an event." I didn't answer that. There wasn't really anything to say. The thing about a near fall is that it lives in your body for a while afterward. I kept feeling it for the rest of the morning, that suspended, stomach-dropping second before the catch, the sudden solidity of someone else stopping my fall, the warmth of large hands on my arms. I was also acutely aware, in a way I hadn't been before, of precisely how much of the building Angel Hill moved through. He wasn't on my floor. There was no reason for him to be on my floor. But I saw him twice in the next week. Once in the elevator where he was already inside when the doors opened and I stepped in and he looked at me the way he had in the lobby. That brief, focused, unreadable look. And I said, "Good morning," and he said, "Good morning" back. And that was 4 words between us total, which somehow felt significant when I thought about it later, which I tried not to do. and once in the cafe on the third floor where I was standing in line for lunch and looked up and he was sitting alone at a corner table with his laptop, and he wasn't looking in my direction at all. And I studied him for approximately 1 second before I looked away and spent the rest of the lunch line staring at the menu I'd had memorized for 14 months. I was not thinking about him. I want to be clear about that. I was noting his presence in the building in the way you notice any unusual thing that has happened to you recently. The human brain processes novel events. This was simply that. Petra, to her credit, did not bring it up again. The second time we had an actual conversation, it was 12 days after the lobby incident. I was in the copy room on my floor. A small, windowless room that smelled like toner and housed 2 ancient printers that jammed constantly and a shredder that everyone was slightly afraid of. It was the kind of room you used for 5 minutes and left. Nobody lingered in the copy room. Except me, because the printer had eaten 23 pages of a report I needed for a 3 o'clock meeting, and I was trying, with rapidly decreasing patience, to locate the paper jam. I had the front panel open. I had my hand inside the machine up to the elbow. I was at the point of the interaction where I was communicating with the printer through clenched teeth, which I was aware was irrational, but which I stood by nonetheless. Then the door opened. I looked up, and there was a moment. One of those moments that the universe seems to arrange with a particular sense of humor, where Angel Hill and I made eye contact across the small space of the copy room. And I was crouched on the floor with my arm inside a printer. He looked at me, he looked at the printer. There was a pause. "Paper jam," he said. "Third one this week," I said. "I've named it. Its name is Gerald." Another one of those near movements at the corner of his mouth. I was beginning to learn to watch for them. Gerald. Gerald is vindictive, and I don't trust him. He set the folder he was carrying down on the side table and crouched down beside me, which was unexpected. I moved slightly to give him space, which put him closer than the lobby, because there was less room. Close enough that I could smell the cedar and sandalwood thing again and had to actively focus on the printer. Which tray? Left feeder. There's a sheet caught somewhere in the back roller. He reached in beside my hand. His fingers were longer than mine, and he found the stuck sheet on the first pass, working it free with a careful, even pressure that I had spent 3 minutes failing to achieve. The sheet came loose. The printer beeped gratefully. He stood back up, and I stood back up, and we were both standing in the copy room, and he handed me the crumpled sheet, and I took it and said, "You're very good at that." "Lots of practice." I looked at him. I couldn't help it. Something about the idea of Angel Hill, head of acquisitions, gravitational force in a suit. Having lots of practice unclogging office printers was so incongruous that it rearranged my understanding of him slightly. "You unclog printers often?" "My first job," he said simply. "Mailroom. Printers jam everywhere." I didn't know what to do with that, so I said, "I'm Sammy Hobbs. Data coordination, 7. And then felt immediately like an idiot, because of course he didn't need my floor number. "I know," he said. My brain stuttered. "You know? You work with the Fielding account. I saw your name on the quarterly overlap report last month." Something in my chest did a small confused thing. He had seen my name on a report, which was not objectively significant. My name was on plenty of reports. That was literally my job, but somehow the fact that he had noted it, filed it, knew it, made my ears feel warm. "Right," I said. "Yes, that's me, Sammy Hobbs, quarterly overlap reports." He picked up his folder. "Angel Hill." "I know," I said, and then wanted to vanish. That near smile again, closer this time, almost reaching his eyes. "Good luck with Gerald." He left. I stood in the copy room holding a crumpled piece of paper, the printer humming contentedly behind me, and thought, with the methodical calm of someone taking their own emotional temperature, that I might be in a small amount of trouble. I told Petra over lunch. She listened with her chin in her hands and a very particular expression. He crouched on the floor and fixed the printer. "Yes." Angel Hill crouched on the floor of the 7th floor copy room and fixed a printer jam. He used to work in the mailroom, apparently. Petra was quiet for a moment. Then, Sammy, don't. I'm not saying anything. You're making a face. It's just my face. Petra. Petra. She held up both hands. I am simply observing that in the span of less than 2 weeks, the man has physically caught you from falling and crouched on the floor next to you to fix your printer jam. And both times you have come to me slightly dazed, and I am noting this observationally, not. It's coincidence. He knew your name. He reads reports. Sammy. She said my name the way she did when she wanted me to hear something past my own defenses. He knew your name. I looked at my lunch. He probably knows everyone's name. He's a senior exec. Does he fix everyone's printer? I didn't answer. She picked up her fork. I'm just saying, note the data. I noted the data. Against my better judgment, against the steady, sensible voice in my head that had kept me out of trouble for 26 years, I noted the data, and I kept noting it. Elevator encounters increased, not dramatically. Not in any way I could point to and say, definitively, this is a pattern, but enough. 3 more times in the next 2 weeks, the elevator doors opened and one of us was already inside. Each time he said something, a word about the weather, a comment about the building's ancient HVAC system, once a question about the fielding account that was entirely professional and that I answered coherently, which I considered a personal achievement. Each time he left the elevator on his floor, 11, and I continued up or down, and I stood in the elevator afterward, doing the grown-up equivalent of trying not to smile. The thing about Angel Hill that I had not understood from a distance was that up close he was different, not easier exactly. The gravity was still there, the stillness that he carried, the way a room reconfigured itself around him. That didn't diminish up close. But there was something else too, something quieter. The careful way he listened. The deliberate economy of his words. He never said anything just to fill silence, which meant that what he did say felt weighted, felt chosen. The mailroom comment. The way he'd simply crouched down and helped with the printer without being asked. The small, rare, almost smiles that I was increasingly collecting in some private part of my memory, like things I wanted to look at later. I was not, I told myself, falling for him. I was simply updating my understanding of him, gathering information, processing an unusual social situation. Petra would have said this was the most self-deluded thing she'd ever heard, which was why I didn't tell Petra. What I told myself instead was that I was responding rationally to a sequence of events that had disrupted my prior understanding of a person, and that the slight elevation in my heart rate whenever I heard elevator doors open was simply the physiological response of a social creature encountering an unresolved interpersonal situation. This seemed at the time like a sophisticated and reasonable position. It was not. It was, as Petra would later observe with the fondness of someone who loves you enough to be honest, absolutely textbook denial. And the only reason it persisted as long as it did was that I was very good at building rational architecture around things I didn't want to look at directly. But the architecture kept developing cracks, small ones, the way I'd find myself replaying the copy room moment at odd intervals, eating lunch, walking to the parking structure, trying to focus on a spreadsheet at 3 in the afternoon. The way I'd start to say something about Gerald or the elevator or an interaction, and then realize I'd said Angel's name 3 times in the last sentence and stop myself. The way I slept better on the nights when we'd spoken, even briefly, and was too sensible to examine why. It rained on a Thursday in the 5th week after the lobby. Not a gentle rain. A sudden, violent, everyone got caught without an umbrella rain that descended at 5:47 p.m. right as the building was emptying out and turned the block outside into a moving wall of gray water. I was standing in the lobby with my jacket held uselessly over my head, watching the rain and calculating the distance between the revolving doors and the parking structure 3 blocks over, and making the kind of assessment that generally precedes a very bad decision. "Your umbrella's in the office," said a voice beside me. I turned. Angel Hill was standing there in his coat, holding a black umbrella, watching the rain with the same expression he used for everything. Calm, thoughtful, slightly removed. How do you know that? Because mine is too. He glanced sideways at me. Where are you parked? Structure on Fielding. You? Same. A pause. The rain intensified if that was possible. We can share, he said. It was not a question, but it also wasn't a command. It was simply an offer, put plainly. I looked at him. He was looking at the rain. It's your umbrella, I said. There's room. That was all. Just, there's room. As if sharing an umbrella with a near stranger in a downpour was completely ordinary. Maybe for him it was. Maybe he was a practical person, and this was a practical solution, and I was the only one standing here with my heart doing something inadvisable. Okay, I said, thank you. We walked out into the rain together. The umbrella was large enough for two people if the two people stood reasonably close. We stood reasonably close. I was acutely aware of his arm raised to hold the umbrella, the slight angle of his body toward mine to keep the shelter even, the occasional shift when a gust blew, and he adjusted without comment. We walked. 3 blocks. In the rain. Long day? I said, because the silence was not uncomfortable, but I was apparently incapable of leaving it alone. Long week, he said. Yours? Gerald jammed again. Something moved in his profile. The almost smile. He's persistent. I've started talking to him. I figure if I can't beat him, I should at least establish a diplomatic relationship. How's that going? He jammed again. A pause. Then, not an almost smile, an actual one. Brief, contained, but real. The corner of his mouth lifting, the faintest crease at the side. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. I very nearly walked into a parking meter. He steadied me with a hand at my elbow. His grip was the same as in the lobby, decisive, unhesitating, and then it was gone. Careful, he said again. Same word, same low, even voice. Something about hearing it the second time made my chest do something I wasn't prepared for. I have a history, I said, with floors, and now sidewalks apparently. I've noticed. I looked up at him. He was looking ahead, but there was something in the set of his mouth that was not entirely neutral. A quality of awareness, maybe. The same quality I'd seen in the copy room, in the elevator, like he was paying attention in a way that was particular. Like he was paying attention to me. We reached the structure. He held the umbrella tilted to keep me dry while I swiped my card at the entrance, and then we were inside out of the rain. And there was a strange small silence that with the absence of rain and the absence of the reason we'd been standing close. He lowered the umbrella. We stood in the parking structure entrance and he shook the water off. Thank you, I said. Seriously, I'd have been soaked. He looked at me. The quality of his attention was different in the dim light of the structure, less filtered somehow, more direct. His dark eyes moved over my face in a way that felt less like assessment and more like something else, something I couldn't name, but that made my skin feel alert. Sammy, he said. The way he said my name was different too. Not the professional neutrality of someone reading a name off a report. Something that had weight, had care in it maybe. I don't know, I'm not sure. Yeah? Do you want to get coffee sometime? The rain hit the entrance canopy. Somewhere in the structure a car started. I stood very still and made sure I had heard that correctly, and then made sure I had heard it correctly again. Coffee, I said. Or something else, whatever you'd like, whatever you'd like. He said it so simply. Like the answer was obviously yes, and he was just sorting out the logistics. I was quiet for long enough that a slightly less composed person might have looked worried. Angel Hill just watched me, unhurried, steady. Yes, I said. I'd like that. Another one of those small, real smiles, there and then contained. Saturday? Saturday works. He nodded. I'll get your number from HR. He paused, something shifting in his expression. With your permission. I laughed. I don't know why. Nerves, maybe, or the sheer unexpected straightforwardness of him. It came out more genuine than I intended. Yes, you have my permission. The smile held for a moment longer this time. Then he tucked the umbrella under his arm and said, "Good night, Sammy," and walked into the structure. I stood at the entrance for a moment. The rain was still coming down. I was dry. My car was on level 3 and I had no more reasons to stand here. I walked to my car and sat in it for approximately 4 minutes, doing nothing before I called Petra. She picked up on the second ring. Hello? Angel Hill just asked me for coffee. Silence. Then, at a volume that was probably unnecessary, knew it. I changed outfits 4 times. This is not a thing I do. I am not a person who agonizes over clothes. I have my workwear, I have my weekend clothes, I know what I look good in, I get dressed and I leave. Saturday morning, I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes, trying on variations of casual but not trying too hard, while Petra sat on my bed eating cereal out of the box and offered commentary. The green one. It's too bright. You look good in bright. I don't want to look like I'm trying. Sammy? He asked you. He wants you to be there. You're allowed to look nice. I know that. It's just, you're scared. I held a shirt against myself and looked in the mirror. I'm not scared. I'm being appropriately measured about a situation that might be nothing. The man asked you to coffee in a parking structure in the rain after walking you 3 blocks and holding the umbrella so you wouldn't get wet, Petra said. It's not nothing. Maybe he's just a friendly person. Petra gave me a look of profound skepticism. Angel Hill, friendly. Fair point. I wore the green one. The coffee place was not in our building. He had texted me the address. He'd gotten my number through the sensible route of just texting me from his own phone, which arrived with the message, "This is Angel. Saturday still works? A.H.H." And I had spent several minutes analyzing the formality of the initials before Petra physically took my phone and replied, "Yes, still good, Sammy." I got there 3 minutes early. He was already there, at a corner table, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, reading something on his phone. He looked different outside the building. Not less. He was never less, but the office gravity was slightly reduced. He looked like a person who had chosen to be in this coffee shop on this Saturday, rather than a force of nature who happened to occupy corporate space. He looked up when I came in, and that direct, dark gaze found me immediately, and he stood, which I had not expected, which nobody did anymore, and which made something warm move in my chest, and said, "You found it." "GPS is a miracle," I said, and he smiled, and we sat down. That's when I discovered something important about Angel Hill. He asked questions. Not polite, rote questions. Real ones. He asked what I liked about data coordination, not what I did, what I liked about it. And when I explained that I liked the patterns, liked finding the stories in numbers, he didn't glaze over. He leaned forward slightly and asked what kind of patterns, and I found myself talking about the fielding account in a way I'd never talked about it before. About the way the data told you things the people hadn't told you yet, and he listened with complete attention. He told me about acquisitions, the parts that weren't in his official title, the negotiations, the relationship reading, the way a deal lived or died on details that didn't show up in any document. He talked about it precisely, the way he talked about everything. But there was something underneath the precision that sounded like passion almost. The thing that kept him in the office late. The thing that had him reading files on Saturday mornings in coffee shops. "You love it," I said, surprised enough to say it plainly. He looked at me. "Most of it. What don't you love?" He considered this. The part where people mistake careful for cold. I felt the comment settle. Careful for cold, the lobby, the elevator, every person in the building who gave him a wide berth without quite knowing why. "Is that what people do?" I said, watching him. His eyes met mine across the table. "Generally. Do I?" Pause. Something moved in his expression. "Not anymore." I held his gaze and felt warmth climb my neck. "The mailroom helped," I said finally. "With the printer. It rearranged my idea of you." "What was your idea of me before? Honestly? Please." "Intimidating," I said. "Not unkind, just like gravity, like you made the air in a room heavier just by being in it." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's an unusual description. It's an accurate one. And now?" Now you crouched on a copy room floor to fix my printer. Now you walked 3 blocks in the rain and held the umbrella over me. Now you stood up when I walked in, and you ask questions like you actually want the answers. And when you smile, it does something to my whole chest. Now, I said carefully, I think maybe you make rooms feel like they have more gravity because you're paying very close attention to everything, and most people find that unsettling because they're not used to being seen. He was very still. Then, quietly, and you? I think I might find it the opposite of unsettling. I paused. Which is its own kind of problem. The smile that came then was not a small one. It was open, real. The kind of smile that rewrote my understanding of his face entirely, that made me realize all the almost smiles had just been this one waiting. I'd like to do this again, he said. Coffee? Coffee, or dinner, or whatever you'll let me arrange. Whatever you'll let me arrange, like my time was something to be treated carefully, like this was not assumed. Dinner, I said, yes. We had dinner the following Friday, and the Friday after that. And somewhere around the third Friday, I realized we were not dating. Not officially, nothing had been said, but we were something that existed in the space between work colleagues and whatever comes next, that lived in Friday evenings and coffee on Saturdays and the increasingly unhurried way we said goodbye at the end of things. He was a deliberate person. I understood that now. Not cold, not calculating, careful, as he'd said. He moved at a pace that felt like he had considered where he wanted to go and had chosen to go there, and he was not interested in being rushed. I was learning to stop rushing. This was a significant thing. I was, by nature, a person who got ahead of myself, who planned 14 moves in advance and then had to backtrack when the situation turned out to be different from my projection. Petra had been telling me this about myself for years. With Angel Hill, I didn't want to get ahead. I wanted to be in the exact moment I was in, because the exact moment was good. The moments kept being good, in a quiet, particular way that I kept catching myself sitting with, turning over, looking at from different angles. He sent me messages. Not frequently, not constantly, but when he had something to say, he said it. A report he'd read and thought of me. An article about data visualization that he thought I might find interesting. Once, at 11:30 at night, Gerald jammed on 11. I prevailed. That one I'd read 3 times before I replied. I sent back, he respects a worthy adversary. His response, he's learning. I put my phone down and smiled at my ceiling for an embarrassingly long time. The 6th Friday, we were at a restaurant in the neighborhood he lived in, not far from my apartment, as it turned out 4 blocks, which was the kind of thing you discovered about someone that reordered your mental map of a city. And we were at the dessert course when the conversation took a turn that I realize now, half expecting and half dreading. Tell me something true, he said. It was something he did, not often, but sometimes, at the end of evenings, as if he liked to finish on something real. I looked at him across the table. The restaurant was quiet around us, warm light, and he was looking at me with that full attention that I had stopped being unsettled by and started, more than started, needing. I don't know what to do with you, I said. He raised an eyebrow, just slightly. In what sense? In the sense that I've been trying very hard for about 6 weeks not to be too much, or want too much, or make this into something it isn't, and I'm not sure it's working. He was quiet. The kind of quiet that was thinking, not avoidance. What do you think you're making it into? I turned my coffee cup in my hands, something I can't backtrack from. There was a long pause. I kept my eyes on the cup. Sammy, I looked up. He was watching me with that particular quality, the attention that felt like being really, truly seen, that I had learned to trust. And his expression was different from usual, open in a way he controlled carefully, most of the time, and wasn't right now. I haven't been trying not to, he said, to want too much, make it something I can't backtrack from. My heart did something that I would describe, clinically, as a catastrophic reorganization. You haven't, I said, carefully. No. Since when? He considered this with the same seriousness he gave everything. The lobby, he said finally. You were apologizing and counting your coffee cups, and you said sorry before I even had a chance to ask if you were all right, and I thought." He paused. Something in his expression shifted. I thought that was the most Sammy Hobbs thing I'd ever seen. I stared at him. "You barely knew me. I'd read your name on 17 reports." "That's not—" "And I'd seen you," he said. "In the lobby. In the cafe. The way you talk to people. The way you move through the building like you're making sure you don't take up too much space, I'd noticed." The warmth in my chest was spreading outward in a way I wasn't trying to contain anymore. "You noticed me." "For months," he said, simply, plainly, the way he said everything true. I sat with that for a moment. Angel Hill, with the gravity and the charcoal suits and the face that people gave wide berth to, watching a clumsy data coordinator move carefully through a lobby. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I wasn't sure it would be welcome." He paused. "And then you fell. And then I fell. And I caught you." His eyes held mine. "And I haven't quite let go. I don't know what my face did. Whatever it did, he saw it, and something in his own expression warmed in response. That rare, real warmth that I had started to understand was the version of him that most people never got. "I don't want you to," I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended, but steady. "Let go." He reached across the table and put his hand over mine, large, warm, certain. The same hand that had caught me in a lobby and unclogged a printer and held an umbrella over my head in the rain and done each of those things without hesitation, without asking for acknowledgement. "Okay," he said. And that was all. Just okay. But in his mouth, with his hand warm over mine and his eyes steady on my face, it felt like a promise made by someone who kept his promises. Being with Angel Hill was a process of discovery. Not dramatic discovery, not revelations, not arguments followed by tearful breakthroughs. He wasn't that kind of person, and, if I was honest, neither was I. We were, in different ways, people who processed quietly, who needed time with our own understanding before we shared it. The difference was that I had never known what to do with another person who was the same way. I was used to having to explain myself to people who wanted more words, more expression, more demonstration. Not because they were wrong to want it, but because my way of being was quieter than what they expected, and quietness reads, to a lot of people, as withholding. With Angel, I didn't have to explain. He waited. He watched. He gathered information with the patience of someone who understood that some things took time to surface. I learned his rhythms. Late mornings on weekends, which he spent at his kitchen table with coffee and work he'd brought home, and music playing low. He liked jazz, specifically a kind of old, slow jazz that felt like Sunday afternoons in amber. He cooked well and without drama, the way he did most things, and he always made enough for two, even before it was established that I'd be there to eat it. He was a reader. Not fiction, mostly, which surprised me, but long-form, non-fiction, history, and science, and once a very dense book about the mathematics of traffic patterns, which he explained to me for 30 minutes one Saturday, and which was against all reason genuinely interesting. He learned mine, that I needed noise to concentrate, some ambient sound music or a podcast or the television on in another room, which was the opposite of him, but which he accommodated without comment, simply by turning something on when I settled down to work at his table. That I processed difficult things through movement, through walking, through doing dishes, or reorganizing a shelf. That I had a tendency toward self-editing in a way that sometimes became self-erasure. That I would cut my own sentences short in the middle of saying something true because I second-guessed whether the truth was welcome. He didn't let me do that. Not confrontationally, not in a way that felt like pressure, just he would wait. When I started a sentence and cut it off, he would wait steadily until I picked it back up. He never asked me to finish. He just made it clear through the quality of his attention that there was time. The first time he did it, I noticed. The second time, I named it. We were in my apartment in the early evening, me sitting on the counter in the kitchen while he made dinner. And I had started to say something about my mother, about a conversation we'd had that week that had gone sideways in the way conversations with my mother sometimes did, and I'd stopped myself halfway through. He was stirring something on the stove. He didn't look up. He didn't speak. I waited. He waited. She means well, I said finally, which was not what I'd been going to say. He turned the burner down, looked at me. What were you going to say before that? I looked at him. He looked back, unhurried. That I feel like I'm never quite the right version of myself with her, I said. That I spend our conversations performing a self that I think she needs, and then I feel guilty for it, and I can't figure out if the guilt is because I'm being false or because I'm not enough. Silence. The kitchen smelled like garlic and something warm. Not enough for her, he said slowly, or not enough in general. I thought about that. Both. I mixed them up. He turned back to the stove. Then, quietly, you're enough. Not, of course you are. Not, don't be silly. Just the statement, plain and direct, the way he said everything he meant. I stayed on the counter and felt that land and settle and didn't say anything because I was learning that with him, silence was not absence. Silence could be full. We weren't without difficulty. I want to tell this honestly. He was private. Not just careful private, the way I'd initially read it, but private in a way that sometimes felt like a wall. There were weeks where something was clearly weighing on him, and he would become more contained, more economical, more here but not here, and I would feel the distance and not know what to do with it. I told him that. About 3 months in, after a week where he'd been present without being present, and I'd spent 4 days trying to calibrate my response and eventually landed on just naming it. When something's heavy, I said, you go somewhere I can't reach. He was quiet for a long time. We were in his apartment, late evening, and he was sitting on the couch with his elbows on his knees and his hands loosely linked, looking at the coffee table. I know, he said finally. I don't need you to solve it out loud. I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking to know you're still there. He looked up at me. Something in his face was working through something. It's not. He stopped. Started again. I grew up being told that difficulty was private, that what happened inside was yours, and you managed it, and you didn't put it on other people. I'm not other people, I said, gently but directly. A long pause. No, he said. You're not. I'm not asking to fix anything. I'm asking to be let in. He looked at me for a while. Something in his expression was doing what it did sometimes, letting me see the underneath of it. The part that wasn't performed or managed, just him. I'm still working on that, he said finally. Being let in. Letting people in. A pause. Letting you in. He stopped. I'm not used to wanting to. I moved to sit beside him, close enough that our arms were touching. You have time, I said. I know. He turned his head to look at me. Close up. Thank you for saying it. I'll say it again, I said, whenever you need to hear it. He held my gaze for a moment. Then he turned his hand over on his knee, opening it, an invitation. I put my hand in his and he closed his fingers around mine and we sat like that for a while. That was all. But it was the most important conversation we had in those early months, I think. The one that made space for what came after. It was Petra who said it first, 4 months in. She was visiting my apartment for movie night, which had technically been movie night with 3 other people, but which had become as the evening went on. Just Petra and me on my couch with the credits rolling on something neither of us had been watching for the last half hour. You're different, she said. I looked at her. Different, how? Settled, she considered. Like before, you were always slightly in the middle of calculating the next move, and now you just seem in the thing. Present. I thought about that. Is that good? It's very good. It's very good. She tucked her feet up. He's good for you. I started. Don't qualify it. I've seen you qualify everything. Just say the thing. I was quiet for a moment. Outside, it was raining. A lighter rain than that Thursday parking structure rain, but rain. It made the apartment feel enclosed, warm, particular. He's the first person, I said, that I've never wanted to be smaller around. Petra smiled, slow and warm. Yeah, she said. That's the thing. He met Petra at a dinner I arranged deliberately, with the care of someone who understood that these two people were important in different ways, and I wanted them to understand each other. They were nothing alike. Petra warm and expansive and immediately comfortable with everyone, Angel measured, precise, careful with new social territory. I watched them across the table and felt a low-grade anxiety that they would not find their way to each other. I should have trusted them. Petra, being Petra, found the question that opened him up. She asked about acquisitions in a genuine way, not a polite way, and Angel, being Angel, could tell the difference, and so he answered genuinely. And somewhere between the appetizers and the main course, she had gotten him to explain the difference between a motivated seller and an obligated seller, and she had laughed at something he said, something dry, something I recognized as his humor which I'd been collecting for months, and after that they were fine. At the end of the evening, outside the restaurant, Petra hugged me goodbye and said, in a voice he was close enough to hear, "He's good, Sammy, he's really good." Walking home, his hand warm in mine, he said, "She loves you." "She does. It's very obvious." A pause. She was testing me. Was she? The seller question. She wanted to see if I would speak to her like she was interesting or like she was a formality. I looked at him sideways. "And?" "She is interesting." He squeezed my hand slightly. "She was right to test me. I thought about that. That's a very generous way to look at it." "I'd want the people who matter to you to make sure," he said simply. There it was. The thing I kept finding, with him, in the corners of statements. The carefulness that was not coldness, the deliberateness that was not distance, the attention that was not performance. Just a man who meant what he said and said what he meant, precisely, when he was ready to. I leaned slightly into his shoulder as we walked. He let me. 6 months. I know that timelines are arbitrary. I know 6 months is not inherently significant. But something shifted around then. Some quality of the between us that changed from careful tending into something that trusted its own weight. I had a key to his apartment. He had one to mine. This had happened without announcement. He had given me his key because I'd been bringing work over on Saturdays, and it made more sense than him leaving his door unlocked. I'd given him mine for the symmetric reason. But holding it on my keychain felt like something. I spent Sunday mornings at his table with my laptop and my headphones in while he read across from me. Not talking, just present in each other's presence. It was the thing that would have seemed small to explain, but that I had come to understand was large. The ability to be quiet with someone, without the quiet needing to be filled. We had argued, not often, not badly, but really, once about something work adjacent. A project that overlapped our departments in a way neither of us had known about, and which created a professional awkwardness that briefly bled into a personal one. Once about the distance thing revisited because he had a hard week and went quiet for 3 days without quite meaning to, and I had let it sit for 3 days and then told him what that did to me. And we had worked through it at a level we hadn't gotten to the first time. Arguments that had endings. Arguments that left things clearer than they'd been before. He came to my family dinner in the 5th month. I want to tell this carefully, because it mattered and because he was so careful with it. My family was loud and warm and overlapping in the way that worked for them and that I loved, but that could be overwhelming if you didn't know what you were walking into. I had tried to prepare him. He had listened and said he'd be fine. He was, objectively, fine. He held his own. He answered questions without hedging. He was polite without being performative. My younger sister Rosa, who was the one in the family who most resembled my own quality of observation, watched him all evening, and then, when he went to help clear dishes, because of course he did, she came and sat beside me and said, "He really sees you, doesn't he?" Not a question, an observation. "Yeah," I said, "he does." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her conversation. In the car afterward, he was quiet for a while. I waited. "Your mother asked me what my intentions were," he said. I closed my eyes briefly. "She what?" Directly. In those words. "Angel, I'm so sorry." "Don't be." A pause. I could hear the almost smile in his voice before I saw it. I told her they were serious. I looked at him. He was watching the road, the faintest curve of amusement at the corner of his mouth. Were you? Did that go okay? She seemed satisfied. Another pause. She told me to take care of you. What did you say? He glanced at me briefly. That I intended to. The warmth in my chest spread to my fingertips. I turned to face the window so he wouldn't see the expression I was almost certainly wearing, and he said nothing because he didn't need to. The quiet was full. 7 months. He took me somewhere he'd never taken anyone. This is what he told me. Not dramatically, not as a statement of significance, but simply walking beside me through a part of the city I didn't know. I've never brought anyone here. It was a park. Not remarkable to look at. A public park, trees, and a pond and a walking path that curved out of sight. But he took me to a bench near the water and we sat, and he told me about it. He'd found it when he was 22, new to the city, new to his career, in a period he described as knowing what I wanted and not yet knowing how to be a person at the same time. He'd started coming here when work was heavy. To sit. Sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for an hour. Not to think, he said. To stop thinking. To let the water and the trees exist without his full attention and feel the relief of not managing anything. He told me this, the way he told me most important things, plainly, without dramatizing, just putting it in front of me and letting me look at it. I sat beside him and looked at the water and felt the weight of what he was doing. This man who had been private, who had had to learn to let things be seen, bringing me to the place where he came to be alone with himself. Thank you, I said. He looked at me. For what? For deciding I was worth letting in. He held my gaze for a moment, something in it that was past careful, past managed, just present, real. You were the first person, he said, who looked at me like you were trying to understand and not trying to figure out how to use what you found. The pond was quiet. Somewhere behind us, a bird and the soft sound of the city at a distance. From the lobby? I said. From the lobby. I thought about the lobby, about being caught, about the strange suspension of that moment and the warmth of hands on arms. And one word, careful, and the look in his eyes that I hadn't known what to do with then but that I understood completely now. I tripped, I said, in front of the most intimidating man in the building. And I caught you, he said, and forgot to let go. He said it like a fact, like something that had simply happened, without apology, without qualification, the same way he said everything he meant. I turned toward him on the bench, he turned toward me. The park was still, the water caught the afternoon light. I had been trying, for 7 months, to put into words what Angel Hill was to me, and I kept running out of words that were big enough, precise enough, close enough to the actual thing. He wasn't a grand gesture. He wasn't a dramatic revelation. He was a key on my keychain, and a hand in the rain and jazz on a Sunday morning, and the deliberate silence that made space for me to finish my sentences. He was the person who had crouched on a copy room floor, and who had stood up when I walked into a restaurant, and who had told my mother his intentions were serious in the same even certain tone he used for all the true things. He was the person who had caught me falling and chosen, simply, not to let go. I love you, I said, quietly, without preamble, just the truth in the open air. He went still for a moment, not with surprise exactly, but with the quality of someone receiving something carefully. Then his hand came up and touched my face, just briefly, the way you touch something that matters. And he said, in that low, even voice, with the accent of someone who meant every syllable, I love you, Sammy. And then he smiled. The full one, the real one, the one I had been collecting in pieces for 7 months and was now seeing whole, and I leaned in and he met me halfway. And the park was quiet around us and the water was still and everything was exactly what it was. Nothing less, nothing more. A year. The lobby floor still shines. I still walk carefully across it, still keep my strides short, still choose sensible shoes for work mornings. Old habits. Some things don't change, some things do. I don't take the stairs to avoid the elevator anymore. I ride up to 7 every morning, and sometimes often the doors open and he's already inside, and he looks at me the way he always looks at me, that full, particular attention, and I step in beside him and the doors close and we ride up a few floors in the comfortable quiet that is ours. He still sends messages when he has something to say. The tone has changed over a year. Warmer at the edges, less formal, sometimes funny in the dry, precise way that is entirely his. Last week he sent me, Gerald attacked a senior partner's presentation. I negotiated a peace treaty. You'll be pleased to know diplomatic relations have improved. I read it 3 times and laughed all 3 times. I sent back, finally. Gerald just needed someone worth respecting. His response, that's a compliment to me. Mine, yes, we have the park. We have the park. We go when the weeks are heavy, when one of us needs to stop thinking, when the city presses close and we need the water and the trees and the silence. We sit on the bench, and sometimes we talk, and sometimes we don't, and the quiet is always full. Petra came to our apartment for the first time last month, the apartment we share now, which is his apartment made into ours through the slow accumulation of my books and his jazz records and the particular arrangement of 2 people's lives. And she walked in and stood in the living room and looked around and said, with immense satisfaction, "This is exactly what I thought it would look like." "What does it look like?" I said. "Like both of you," she said. "Exactly, and at the same time." Angel was in the kitchen. I heard, from that direction, the small sound that I knew was his quiet, real laugh. I don't have a tidy way to end this story, because it isn't ended, it's ongoing. It is currently in progress, which is the best thing I can say about anything. But I think about the lobby sometimes, the marble floor and the coffee carrier and the new shoes with the inadvisable heel, the fall that was going to happen and then didn't, the pair of hands, warm and decisive, that stopped it. There's a version of that morning where the timing is different by 30 seconds, where he's already in the elevator when I come through the doors, or where I took the stairs, or where I wore better shoes and walked carefully as I always did and nothing happened. I think about that version sometimes and I feel the particular strangeness of how small a hinge a life can turn on. A tripped step, a caught arm, one word, low and even, careful. And then 7 months of carefully, deliberately, intentionally choosing the same person over and over until careful became certain and certain became home. I tripped in front of the most intimidating alpha in the building. He caught me. He forgot to let go. I'm glad. I am so glad. Every single day, in the quiet and the ordinary, and the music on Sunday mornings, and the key on my keychain, and the hand that finds mine without looking, I am so glad. If you made it to the end, you're my kind of person. Leave a subscribe. Comment down your favorite part of the story, and if you want early access to videos, exclusive content, or just want to support the channel, hit that join button right below the video. Even one member genuinely means the world to me. See you in the next one.